Now, Albert Barnes writes, the apostle here has hit on the very danger to which parents are most exposed in the government of their children. It is that of souring their temper. You say, yes, we've got to be very, very careful. We don't want to sour their temper. But you can do that not only with too rigid a discipline and too strict a rule, you can also do it with indulgence. And that's probably the problem in your family. By and large, in America, we're not too strict with our children. By and large, we're too indulgent with our children. And that will sour their heart just as quickly as anything else. Now, the phrase provoke to anger. It's very, very important. He says here in verse 4, fathers, it's a negative command, do not provoke your children to anger. It comes from the Greek word parorgizo, from a Greek word orge, which means wrath. And what it means is to be in a relationship with a child and acting in such a way that you're going to exasperate the child. You're going to provoke the child to anger and wrath. You're going to make them bitter and resentful. Now, in a few minutes, we're going to explain that there's many ways to do that. But that's what it means when he says, do not provoke them, do not provoke your children to anger. Literally, don't provoke them to becoming wrathful and bitter and angry. It's not just an outburst of anger, but it's the idea of creating an angry, wrathful character and a sour character that does not respond, but always withdraws. Now, in Colossians 3:21, it says, fathers, do not exasperate your children so that they will not lose heart. Now, there's two things here in this passage. First of all, exasperating children. We're warned against that. And also, if we exasperate them, we are told of the possibility of them losing heart. Now, the word exasperate, erethizo, means to stir up or provoke resentment. And to lose heart means to dishearten, dispirit, to break the spirit, to lose heart, when a child simply loses heart. Now, how can we do this? I've written down some things that I believe, at least in our culture, are primarily responsible for having bitter children, discouraged children, children that have simply just given up on a relationship with parents. First of all, neglect. Sir, your child is only going to ask you to play so many times. And then he's going to go find someone else to play with. And it's going to be very, very hard to get him back in the yard playing ball with you. You have only a certain number of years to create what many have called bindings or strings. To tie strings with your children, to bond with them and bind with them so that they know, I am beloved of my Father. That's one of the things. They could crush Jesus. They could do whatever they wanted to Him. He could go through immense trials. But the one thing He always knew, I am beloved of my Father. There comes a time, and it is a short window, when you can actually create these strings of binding. You're the most important person in your child's life. But you can lose that status through neglect. When you neglect a child, as when you neglect a wife, they will simply become bitter. Another way in which a child may become bitter and angry is expectation without investment. And this is, fathers are given to this temptation. When their child, even at the age of 3 and 4 and 5 and on in, just keeps going. When their child is not the virtuous person they want them to be, is not the disciplined or instructed person they want them to be, they make demands upon that children. What is wrong with you, child? Why can't you see this? Why can't you do this? They're demanding things from a child, but they never made the investment in the child. They never did all these things in the Bible. It's just demand, 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 but no investment. You know, they did a survey on, I believe it was insurance salesmen, but I believe it just applies just about everywhere. They found out that 80% of the insurance salesmen sell 20% of the insurance, and 20% of the insurance salesmen sell 80% of it. And you know the differences between the two? The successful group did what they did not want to do. And the unsuccessful group did not do what they did not want to do. You see, sir, this is a battle. You think of battle, you sing these Christian songs about victory and battle and against the devil and everything else. But the real battle is not quite so glamorous. The real battle is getting up every day and obeying the Word of the Lord. And it's doing it in the context of the family. And God tells us that we are to invest in children. We are to invest in our children. Someone comes to me, they're standing out in the middle of a field and they're mad as all get out. What's wrong? Look at my crop. Well, I don't see one. That's the problem. That's why I'm mad. There's no crop. I said, well, did you plow? No. Did you sow? No. Did you cultivate? No. He's going to walk away. Guy's out of his mind. But that's the same thing that happens. Children become bitter because their parents are angry. And their parents are angry because the children didn't turn out the way they wanted them to. But when you look back on it, where was the investment? Where was the investment? Now, also, failure to teach, train, and illustrate. What we need to understand in the Bible, was a revelation to me. An older, wiser family shared this with me a few years ago, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. It is not enough to teach your children. You must train your children. And it's not enough to teach and train. You must illustrate. Let me give you an example. A lot of times I love archery, and I'll find a boy that really just doesn't have anyone that's very much interested in him. I'll make him a bow, and I'll take him outside and teach him how to shoot. Now, before he ever gets that bow in his hands, I teach him a lot of things. I teach him a lot of things about where you put your hand, how loose, how tight, how to pull the string back, keep your shoulder level, pull with your back muscles, all sorts of things, where to be looking at the target, everything. I tell him that. But if I just tell him that and put the bow in his hands, he's not going to, he's not going to be able to figure it out. There's just too much. So then I take him outside to where I have my bag, and I say, now watch me. Now see how my feet are? Remember what I told you about shoulder? Remember what I told you about where your toes are supposed to be facing? Now, look at my elbow. See the way it's turned out just enough to keep getting whacked by the string? Now, I'm going to bring this bow up. Now, feel my back. Put your hand on my back. He puts his hand on my back. Feel, that's the only muscle that's moving is my back. Now, watch my hand. When I let go, this hand is going to slide off my cheek and keep going straight back so that I don't pluck the string. And on and on. I'm going to illustrate it for him. And then, but that's not enough. Okay, he's heard teaching, he's seen an illustration, but now what? Son, pick up the bow. Okay, now you're gripping too tight. Okay, now loosen up here. Now remember what I said? I grab his elbow and I turn it. And we go through this process hundreds and hundreds of times. Training. It's the same way. Let me give you an example from Suzanne Wesley, the mother of Charles and John Wesley. She was to teach them. Charles and John, when an adult enters in the room, when you're seated on the sofa or whatever, an adult enters into the room, stand up. When they leave, sit down. They said, okay, Mom. She said, now I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. She stood up, sat down. Now, she said, here's what we're going to do. Sit on the sofa. They sat on the sofa. She walked out. She came in. They didn't stand up. She said, what did I tell you? Oh. She stood up. She walked out. They sat back down. She walked back in. They